Hello, hello. Welcome back to the show. Wow, what a day we've got today. First, I want to tell you that in 2003, while I was studying to be a transformational life coach, there was a daytime reality television show called Starting Over, which I became totally hooked on. I'd learned about something in school, and then I would go home and I'd get to see it implemented on television by master coach Rhonda Britten with an actual client. That show was so meaningful to me, and specifically, Rhonda shaped how I worked as a transformational life coach, charter school administrator, crisis support worker, foster parent, and in all of my positions since that time. Who knew that 15 years later, I'd be calling my TV mentor my friend? Today, it's an honor to welcome Rhonda Britten to the show. Rhonda
Thank
has
you.
devoted her life to one thing: to teach people how to master fear. Whether that's a fear of rejection or loss, fear of failure or success, fear of abandonment or pain, Rhonda has created a method for anyone, anywhere to master the invisible, insidious fear that we all have of not being good enough. She teaches What she teaches is what she's lived. After witnessing the horrific murder suicide of her parents at the tender age of 14, Rhonda went into a 20-year spiral of self doubt, blame, and addiction. She tried everything to help herself, but still had nightmares every night and couldn't get past the fear that there was something wrong with her. After her third suicide attempt, when she woke up very much alive, Rhonda knew she had to find another way. What she discovered is a pathway to freedom that cuts through false beliefs, negative thoughts, and the silent, secret fears every human being carries. Her simple yet life altering method is called Fearless Living. She's an Emmy-Award winner and repeat Oprah guest. To date, Rhonda has altered lives in over 600 episodes of reality television that aired in more than 25 countries and impacted millions worldwide. She's also a recipient of the Smart Women of the Year Award, Coach of the Year, a blog favorite at Huffington Post, speaks at TEDx and on numerous corporations and organizations such as Southwest Airlines, Blue Shield of California, Northrop Grumman, and many more. To create a support network, Fearless Living Institute was born, which hosts free public introductory classes, online courses, in-person weekend workshops, 7-day starting over intensives, and certifies fearless living life coaches plus train the trainer programs. Rhonda's 4 books include her best-selling Fearless Living, which shares her groundbreaking work called The Wheel of Fear, Change Your Life in 30 Days, Fearless Loving, and Do I Look Fat in This? Rhonda's world-class keynote speaker, television personality, and master life coach. It's such a pleasure to have her here with us today. Hello, Rhonda.
Thank you, Miss Nicole. I sound so cool. Thank you for sharing all that.
Absolutely. Yes. It's longer than I normally do. But, when we first met, as I told you, and as I just shared with my listeners, like it's so, it's so incredible how sometimes we don't even realize it. And maybe you do, you probably do. But I think a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, leaders, I think sometimes we do what we do because we have to do it. And it's just who we are. And we don't get to know the impact we've had
Mm,
on individual people's lives. And we know we're doing things right, but to be able to actually have an awareness of that, the way you affect a specific person, like again, 15 years ago, I was just starting my path in terms of coaching. And I mean, if somebody told me that 15 years later I'd be hanging out with you and eating and drinking and just having good times, I'd be like, what? And so it's pretty amazing to be able to. I mean, I'm so blessed to get to know so many incredible people, but to actually be able to be face to face and to know somebody who did have such an impact in my development professionally and also personally is really fantastic. And so to have you here today, to talk about your journey and share that with my audience. I'm hoping that many people who maybe haven't known of you yet are going to be introduced to you and find so much opportunity to improve their lives and their businesses through what you have to share.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you. And it's an honor. And, one of the great things about being on TV every day for so many years that I did is that people would come up to me all the time at Target, at the gas station, when I'd be eating. I mean, I couldn't go anywhere without being recognized. And it was such a joy because people would come up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, you're Rhonda Britten for Starting Over." And, I always ask them, well, how is starting over impacting you? Because I'm not interested in you recognizing me for the sake of recognizing me. I want to know how it's impacting you. And that's the cool thing. I would ask every single person I ever met who recognized me. And I still do this today. Like the other day, somebody recognized me at the TSA, going through the airport. She's like, "Are you that woman from that TV show?" And I'm like, "Yes." And she's like, "Oh my God," but I want to know how it impacted, right? I want to know that I made a difference. I wasn't on TV as an actress just, reading a part. I was actually, like I always said, I don't play a life coach. I actually am a life coach, and I actually have to change their lives. So, Starting Over wasn't scripted. All the exercises you saw, I created, and, I got to really do my work on TV, and that was such an honor.
Amazing. So I'd love to talk about what that work was and how it came to be. But before we do, for folks who are not yet familiar with you, I did reference it in your intro. Can you take us back, because you have a very, I think sometimes in the world that I've worked in, what's that?
Horrific.
Horrific, yes. But, I think oftentimes when people face the kind of trauma that you faced, I don't think we see as many of them in such successful positions. So I'd love if we can go back. I know this is a very personal story, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing kind of even before the tragedy, which you do in the book so beautifully, kind of give us an overview of when you were a little girl, kind of where did you see your life going and what was life like until that day?
I think that for the most part, I was one of those little girls that I would have my nose up to the television watching Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball. And it's so funny because I think about that now, and in my 20s and 30s, or even in my teens, I never thought I was funny, but I wanted to be Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball so bad, right? But I grew up in a little tiny town, so I didn't know any artists. I didn't know anybody that painted. I didn't know anybody that sang professionally. I didn't know anyone that did anything beyond my little town. So being an actress was beyond my comprehension. Being a professional singer was beyond my comprehension. And I still kept dreaming about it. I kept thinking about it, which is, of course, the joke of the century that I am on TV playing myself. But that was me. I grew up, we lived in Upper Michigan, Upper Minnesota. And, my mother loved me, and I have two sisters. And then my father didn't like me so much. And I think my mother tried to make up for my dad in some ways, right? But you can't make up for that, really. And so the day that it was on Father's Day that my father came over, my parents were in the middle of separating, and he came over to take us out to Sunday brunch for Father's Day. And, when he pulled that gun out, I really did believe that I was going to be next, because he had tried to strangle me when I was 12. I was kind of like the kid in the family that he kind of focused on. My other two sisters were kind of spared. And that's why when I hear about families who, one person is saying, "Our parents were abusive," and everyone else is going, "No, they weren't." It's like, because you weren't there. So I think that is so prevalent in so many families that one person gets kind of picked on. And so that was me. So when he pulled out that gun on Father's Day and he pointed it at me, I absolutely, with every bone in my body and cell in my being, believed he was going to fire that gun and kill me. And I think that was his intention, to be honest. I think his intention was to kill me. except my mother, who he had already shot once, screamed out no because she saw the gun in my face. And in that moment, my father, realizing my mother's still alive, took that bullet intended for me and shot my mother a second time. So that cry of my mother's basically saved my life, because he shot her again, shot her the second time. And then he basically ran in front of me, put the gun on the ground, pointed it at his head, and fired. And so I was the sole witness to my father murdering my mother and committing suicide when I was 14. And that moment that it happened, obviously it feels like a movie almost, like it feels surreal, except it's not. It's happening. And for a long time, I had a difficult time watching any realism, like even today, I don't want to see realistic killings because I've already seen that. Thank you. So I don't need that gratuitous violence, so to speak. But being able to be where I am today after 20 years of hell after that, because it was 14 years of hell before and then 20 years of hell after that. During those 20 years, I really blamed myself for my parents' death. I was the only one that could have stopped it. I was the only one that could have jumped in front of my mother. I was the only one. So the fact that I didn't do anything heroic really caused me great shame and great embarrassment and great humiliation. And also my relatives didn't talk to us either. So, I was kind of like left to this feeling of guilt and shame. And therefore, for the next 20 years, I just drank, tried to kill myself 3 times, got 3 DUIs. And it was that third suicide attempt that I realized I'm not good at killing myself and I better figure this out. So I didn't think that I was supposed to live, and I didn't really want to live until that third suicide attempt, when I realized I'm not supposed to die because I keep on living. And that was the moment when I realized I've got to do something about this, because I can't keep doing what I'm doing.
Thank you for sharing that. In that moment where you realized that, was it almost like an instant wake up and you started putting everything right, or was there some kind of process? I mean, what was it like when you realized like things have to change?
Well, the 20 years that I was an alcoholic and suicidal and DUIs all over the place, I was still going to therapy, going to workshops, reading books. I was doing everything. I mean, I was trying to help myself. It's just that nothing really worked in the sense of really shifting my mindset and seeing myself differently. I always say that, I would read a book and it'd tell me how much, like, love yourself. And I'd be like, well, how do you love yourself? I mean, if you don't love yourself, telling somebody to tell you to love yourself is like, are you kidding me? Like, you're a crazy person. It's a huge leap. And I think that's where self-help goes wrong. And that's where self-help went wrong for me, is I think they tell you how you should be. And even some spiritual practices tell you how you should be, but they don't actually show you step by step how to do it. So a few things happened before that moment of my third suicide attempt, around the same time, I should say. One of the key things is I had to get sober because I was an alcoholic. And I don't think that without getting sober, I don't think I'd be sitting here today, for sure. And that moment when I got to my apartment after that third suicide attempt, that realization, it was like, I don't want to say it was like, it was almost as if I said to myself, if I could erase my life and start over, what would I do? And I remember having the thought very vividly of, I have to go back to kindergarten, because I clearly don't know how to live. I don't know how to live my life. I don't know how to do this. And so the first thing I did was actually get out. I went to the store, got a calendar, and got some gold stars. And for a month, for 30 days, I kept track of anything good I did for 30 days. Just put a little gold star on it, kept track of it, wrote it down, still have the calendar to this day. It's on my office wall. And because I had to prove to myself, justify to myself, that I was worth living for, that I was worth saving, that I was even worth thinking about loving. So that calendar was the beginning of my change. And that took about, like I said, 30 days. And after 30 days, I went, there's some good things here. Like maybe I can do it. And that was the beginning of my hope that maybe I could change my life.
Amazing. And then at what point did you realize that you could also change others' lives?
Yeah. Well, that was shocking, by the way, to me, because I'm doing this for my life, not thinking about anybody else's. I'm just trying to save my own life. And I was at church, actually, and this couple that I know followed me out in the parking lot. And they said to me, I'll never forget it. They said to me, "Hey, Rhonda, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing." Because if you remember my state of mind, I was embarrassed and humiliated that none of these other things helped me, that therapy didn't make me feel better. I was embarrassed that workshops didn't make me love myself. I was embarrassed by all this. So the thought that I had to make up my own exercises was not like, look at me, I made up my own exercises. It was like, are you so sick and bad that you have to make up shit yourself? Because that's how I felt. It was embarrassing. So when they asked me, like, what are you doing? I was like, nothing. And they're like, no, you're different. What's different about you? And I'm like, I tried to get out of it. Like, I did not want to tell them that I'd made up this exercise for myself. But they were after me. They were like, you, tell me. And so I finally said, well, I'm doing this thing. I'm doing this exercise I made up. And they're like, well, tell us. And I'm like, again, okay, but I did it for me. And they're like, yes, but tell us. So I give them the exercise. And next week at church, they came to me and said, it's working. Give me another one. And I went, what? I mean, it was literally shocking to me. And it took me many, many months and years to actually start teaching others. But that was the moment where I had the realization, maybe this isn't for just me. But it took me years to actually own and give myself permission to actually stand up and say, I might have something people want to know. I might know something. Come on over here. It was scary.
I bet. Do you mind telling us what that exercise was?
Sure, of course, I'd be happy to. It basically comes off the first exercise I gave them was from that calendar. I created an exercise called acknowledgements, and it's different than affirmations. It's different than, gratitudes. Acknowledgements is really specific. It's called, you say, today I acknowledge myself for. Today I acknowledge myself for. And you acknowledge yourself for anything that you did, regardless of how well you did it, regardless of whether you finished it, any movement forward. It was like this tiny little movement forward you have to give yourself credit for. So back then, nobody was talking about this. I mean, nobody told me this. I just was like, I have to give myself credit for every single thing I do. So I would literally write out, today I acknowledge myself for putting on my tennis shoes. Acknowledge myself for having a new thought. Acknowledge yourself for saying different words than you normally would. I mean, I'm talking every single movement of change that you make. Because when you start acknowledging yourself, your confidence rises. And as your confidence rises, then you take more risks and you do more challenges. So they started, and I always tell people, if you do acknowledgements for 3 days, your confidence will increase. I mean, I've had people after 1 day, they say their life changed. So and again, if you're a perfectionist, if you're somebody who wants everything perfect, acknowledgements will kill you. They'll kill you. Yes, they'll kill you. Because you're going to want to not give yourself credit because you didn't do it perfect. You didn't do it right. You could have done it better. So there's no conversation about what could have happened. There's only the conversation of, did you put those shoes on or not? Did you actually walk to the gym or not? And did you have that new thought or not? Not did you act on the new thought, but did you actually have a new thought? So breaking it down to those tiny steps actually is a way to increase our confidence, so we start believing in ourselves and start building the fortitude and actually to make change. So that's the first exercise I gave them.
I love it. So as you're going through this process and you're recognizing that other people need what you have and you're bettering your own life, you said it took some years to really own it. Were you behind the scenes working on it while that was happening, or were you already in the space where you were helping others actively?
No, I mean, what I did is I went to school during that time. I went to school to become a spiritual practitioner. I was involved in a group where they had like little coaches, and they obviously not coaches like we know today, but basically people that helped beginners come into the class. And those are the things that I was doing. But I still, like people would, like I went to school to become a spiritual practitioner, but I had no intention of becoming a practitioner. I had no intention of having clients. Because again, I still wasn't buying into the fact that I should actually do this. But clearly some part of me did, because I was going and getting training. And then one of my clients, how it really turned into me becoming a coach, was one of my clients. I owned my own PR agency at the time, and doing small businesses. And one of my clients was one of the very first coaches. And there's probably five coaches in the world at that time. And I would help him with PR. And instead of just helping him with PR, I started kind of helping him with everything. And he would tell me every day I worked with him, you're going to be a better coach than me. You're going to be a better coach than me. And I said, oh no, contraire. No. And I mean, I remember just almost arguing with him, like, that's not going to happen. I can't do that. And I was working with him for, I don't know, maybe it was 6 or 7, 8 months. And I'll tell you what gave me full permission to actually say yes to coaching, to become a coach, was, and I very rarely tell this story because it's kind of woo-woo, Nicole. It's woo-woo, okay?
You can woo out here.
You can woo out here. I can woo out here. Okay. So I'm at his office helping him work. We're creating some new program or something. And don't even ask me how I knew how to create programs or knew how to do, but I did. Somehow I intuitively knew how to do all these things. And I'm sitting on the couch. He's up on the board. He's writing stuff down. And all of a sudden, on the right-hand side, on the very right, way, way up here in the heavens, the sky opened up. And there was a book. And the book went like this. And then the book shut and disappeared back in the sky. And I'm like, first thing I did, Nicole, was turn around. That can't be for me. It must be for somebody else. And, and Paul is up there by the board. There's nobody else in the room, but I literally turned around and went, this cannot be for me. Because what I got when that sky opened up and that book went is the answer to every question I'd ever asked, and the message that it is my responsibility now to share it. And that I had, that it was my job to share the message and to become a coach. And I didn't say anything to Paul in that moment. I was like, because I was freaking out. I ran to my minister in spiritual practitioner training, like literally ran there and said, this thing happened to me. And it said that I'm supposed to help people and that what? And she goes, you've gotten the call. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't even have at the time I hadn't even finished my bachelor's. I was 2 credits short. And because of course I can't finish it because that would make me worthy. So, I had 2 credits left. I was like, I have to go get my bachelor's, and then I have to go get my master's, and then I have to go get my PhD, and then I have to write a book. I said, I have to do all that because no one's going to listen to me. No one's going to listen to me. No one's going to listen to me. And she's like, the call came. You are ready. And I'm like, I literally argued with her for 6 months. And she basically kept saying, and so did Paul. Paul kept saying, you're a better coach than me. You're a better coach than me. And she kept saying, the call has come. It's time to answer. It wants you just the way you are. And I was like, okay. And so it took about 6 months from that happening for me to take my first client on. And I would have my session and I would run to Paul's house and say, okay, she said this, I said that, she said this, I said that, she said this, I said this, I told her this, is that okay? And he goes, okay, next time do this. And I'm like, run, have a session, run back to Paul's house. And that's why I think mentoring is so critical for coaching, because to have somebody that's really experienced, have your back. So I worked with Paul for about, again, I was already working with him for 6 to 8 months already, but as a one-on-one, probably 6 to 8 more months. And then I just, within 6 months of me taking my first client, I had 20 clients at the 6-month mark. So I had a full-time practice in 6 months. And it really was because once I surrendered, and I think that's the key, I was on the fence for all those years, like back and forth, yes, no, yes, no. And I think all that yes, no obviously is based in fear. And the minute I said yes and I surrendered, then everything, the doors open up, right? We all hear that, right? The doors open up. And the doors did open up. And then I just kept listening and kept going.
That's awesome. So you had your one-on-one practice, and then at what point did you decide, because I know a little bit about, how you got into the television world. Can you tell us from starting your practice till being on television, what was that like, timeline, and also awareness wise, and did they come to you first? Did you go to them? How'd that work out?
Well, the first thing I did was obviously do one-on-one clients. And I live in Los Angeles. And for the first probably year, I drove to everybody and I charged them $25, right? And then I got it to 30 and then to 50. And then after about a year, I said, okay, people have to start coming to me because I'm driving everywhere and I'm making no money because I live in Los Angeles and I'm driving everywhere. So then they started coming to my house. So I saw everyone live in the beginning, didn't do any phone work yet. And one of my clients said to me, Rhonda, I want you to come into my business and teach my employees these things. And I went, oh, no, I don't teach workshops. You noticing a theme here, Nicole? No, I don't do that. And so I said, I will train you to do that. I will share what you should share with them, and then you go and tell them. I don't do that. So we tried that for about 3 to 4 sessions, and of course, it was a disaster. So I said, okay, I'll come in one time, but don't ever ask me again. I'm only coming once because I don't do that, okay? Now notice again a theme. No, yes, no, right? And I think that's normal for so many of us. So I went and talked.
Many of us.
Yes, so many of us. Like, no, I can't possibly do that. What, are you crazy? I mean, and so I literally was like, I only work one-on-one with people. That's all I do. I don't do workshops. So I ended up going to my client's business. There were 4 employees, and I was in this little tiny room with a little board and these 4 people sitting in front of me. And I started talking, and I loved it. I loved it. I was like, oh my God, that was so much fun. So immediately I said, I'm going to have a workshop once a month in my house. So that's what I started doing. It used to be called an intro night. And I would have it one night a month. And then I started implementing workshops in my house. And at that same time, I started thinking like, well, gee, if I want to fill workshops, I better go speak. So then I started speaking. And again, I was never trained professionally for either of these tasks. I think just somehow God gave me that in order for me to do my job, so to speak, right? And so then I started speaking. And then when I would be speaking and teaching, people always said to me, I want my cousin in Cincinnati to know what, will you write a book? I'm like, okay. So I started taping my talks and started taping myself and thinking like, okay, well, maybe that's a book somewhere in there. That didn't end up happening, i.e. from the tapes, but I taped myself just to start. I started selling my tapes then too, by the way. That's how I started making money. I would do free talks and make a ton of money because everybody wanted to take me home with them. And then at about like the 5-year mark of it being in business, I just kept getting so many requests for books that I said, okay, I'm going to write a book. And it took me a year to write the proposal. I rewrote it 3 times. It took me actually only 4 months to write Fearless Living once I wrote it, once I wrote the proposal. And I had 12 publishers auction for it. I had a 4-day auction. And it was an amazing experience. And I got $200,000 for an advance back then as an unknown author. And there wasn't the internet the way we know it today. There was no social media. And so I was sending emails through AOL groups. So just think about that. There was no platforms. There was no Entreport or Infusionsoft or iContact. There was nothing. I would just send the same email to different groups for every class that everyone took. So I'd have like 20, 30 groups and just have to send it again and again. So I wrote my book, got it published, obviously, and it was it's like in 16, 18 languages. And one of the countries, I went on a whole book tour in America, like 30 cities. And then they sent me to England and Ireland and Scotland, and then sent me to Australia. And when I was in England is when TV came up. So I was in England, and my publicist, who was walking me, taking me everywhere, is like, Rhonda, there's a company here, and they want to create a show, reality show for life coaches. And they've been interviewing everybody for the last 9 months, and they're about to close the idea down because they can't find anybody. Would you like to audition for it while you're here? They're wondering if you'd audition for them. And I went, sure. And because I'm a yes girl, in the sense of after I say yes, I say yes. And went, auditioned, and they had a girl there for me to coach, and I coached the heck out of them. Their mouths dropped open, and 3 weeks later, I was living in London. And that's really how it happened. And then from there, I did Help Me Rhonda for two seasons, and two seasons. And then when I was coming back from the second season, Starting Over was casting. And I literally was the only person in the entire world who had done this already. Like the only person in the entire world. So I went to the callback, went to the final 5, so to speak. And the producers are like, well, Rhonda, we're going to have the show like this, and the show's going to be like this, and the show's going to be like this. And I'm like, yeah, that's not how it's going to be. No, I've been doing this for 2 years. This is how it's going down. So I didn't know that they were going to hire me or not. I actually said, if they're brave, they'll hire me. But if they want control, they won't, because I know more than they do. But they did hire me. And then I was on Starting Over for 3 seasons. And then I went on Celebrity Fit Club. So that is the journey of all that. And inside, when I was doing, I wrote my first book, published in 2001, and then I wrote another 3 books in the next 10 years.
Awesome. I totally forgot about Celebrity Fit Club till you just
Celebrity Fit Club. And that was an experience because they brought me in at the, not right away. They already had somebody. And they actually went through, I think, 2 or 3 people, I don't remember, but several people. And they kept on saying, they're not working. And I never even met the producers. We just met on, Skype. And they interviewed me there, and they just said, we want you to do what you did on Starting Over. Come and do it here. And I'm like, okay. And the set was so unfriendly to change that it took me, I went on the set for the first time, and it was going to go do my first group. And all of a sudden I look over to my right, and there's 20 producers and 20 camera people and 20 executives there. And I went, well, no wonder the coach or the therapist can't get anything out of anybody. You can't, the set has to be closed. So after the first group on Celebrity Fit Club, I went into the executive producer's office and said, yeah, closed set. You want me to get Bobby Brown to cry? I got to have a closed set. Nobody can talk to them except me. Nobody can be watching. It's only me and the person. That's it. And that's what they did. That's what they finally did it. It took 3 episodes to get everybody acclimated, but I did get to what I needed to do my work.
Awesome. So now bring us up to today. Let's talk about the Institute. Let's talk about what you're up to. You've got a podcast. How did you because you've not been on television for a while, right? When did that end?
Celebrity Fit Club was 2010.
So 8 years
Mm-hmm.
from when we're recording.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you, what's been going on since, and where are you at today?
Well, it's been an amazing journey as always. I had the Institute in 2000. So before Fearless Living ever was published, I started the Fearless Living Institute because my goal is, regardless of how much money you have or how much time you have, there's something here for you, because everybody has fear. And so I don't want money or time to be an issue for anybody. So I've been training coaches since 2000. I've been having workshops. At one time, I had 22 workshops a year before 2008 hit, 2010, the crash hit. But yeah, we used to have 22 workshops a year. I had 5 trainers, full-time trainers. I've trained over 500 coaches. And so it's just continued. But after Celebrity Fit Club, I went through my own personal journey of, I went through what's called the Dark Night of the Soul. And the Dark Night of the Soul was basically ripping dark night of the soul is basically ripping everything you think is true away from you to create a new reality for yourself. So for me personally, I have done probably some of the deepest work that I've done over the last 8 years. And I'm actually in the middle of writing my 5th book, which is about the dark night. And I've just got my new podcast, and I'm starting the Fearless Living podcast in 2019. I'm kind of excited about that.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're coming to the end, and before we
No!
go, no, I know, I talk to you forever, but I know you have places to be, so we can put a pin in it and say till next time. But before we go, we still have a few minutes, so I'd love for you to share kind of final words of wisdom with my audience of business owners, entrepreneurs. Like, I mean, your story is so impactful, I think, just in itself. But if there's anything you can leave our audience with today, I'd love for you to share that, and also to share how people can continue the conversation with you.
Yes. I have a gift for all your listeners. I think the most important thing that I can say, that I ever say, that the thing that I know to be true to the core of my being, is that there's nothing wrong with you. And so all of that conversation in your head about, I should do it this way, I should do it that way, I should be better, I should be that, comparing, competing, all of that stuff is just fear. So there's literally nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. And if you're willing to start having a conversation with fear, start seeing fear differently and working through fear differently, you will be able to transcend that voice. I mean, I don't beat myself up anymore. And, I think about, I read, like right now, because I'm writing my book on the Dark Night, I'm reading a lot of diaries from when I was younger. And I read these words that I used to say to myself all the time and what I used to journal about. And I was just so hard on myself and just so tough. And I thought I had to be, right? Because you have to be tough on yourself to change your life. And that's actually the opposite of what you have to be. The softer you are with yourself and the more compassionate you are with yourself, the more accomplished, the more powerful, and the more empowered you're going to be. So I think if I could say anything, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just fear. And fear isn't, I'm scared and I'm afraid, because most of us don't say that, and I know I don't. But you do worry, and you don't worry unless you have a fear. I bet you get overwhelmed. Well, you have a fear under there. Procrastinate. Procrastinate is a symptom of fear. Perfectionism, symptom of fear. So all the things you think are wrong with you are just symptoms of a deeper fear inside of you that was created by the time you were 5. And it's not your fault. It's like how we're wired in our neurobiology. And it does not have to run your life. So fear does not have to decide for you. Fear does not have to decide for you. Fear does not have to decide for you. But if you're still feeling at odds with yourself, like me, I did all that work, all those workshops, all those books, everything, and I still in the middle of the night felt like I wasn't good enough. If you still feel and wonder if you're good enough, if you still wonder if there's something wrong with you, if you still think like, well, what's my problem? Then you haven't actually faced fear in the way that I would love to show you how to face fear, which brings me to my gift. Because I'm not interested in you like facing fear, like being tough. That again, that's not fear. So let me give you my gift. It is one of my favorite exercises that's going to blow your world away. It's called Stretch, Risk, or Die. And I know for so many of us, we have our to-do list. And that to-do list is, let's say we have 10 things on our to-do list, and we do 1, 2, 3, and we skip 4, and we do 5, 6, and we skip 7. And that 4 and 7 keep moving, and we never get them done. And we're like, why? Why can't I do it? Why? Right? And all of that, why can't you do it, is symptoms of fear. The reason you can't do it is you're not really including the emotional risk it takes to do anything on your to-do list. So Stretch, Risk, and Die is actually going to allow you to go after your dreams, go after your intentions, go after your goals in a whole new way. I'm literally going to turn your to-do list on its head. And you are going to have a new way of seeing all your goals that you're going to be able to achieve. So go to fearlessliving.org, fearlessliving.org / that lovely / risk, fearlessliving.org / risk, RISK. And you're going to see a page, and it's going to ask for your name and email. and write your name and email there, and then you will automatically get it delivered to your inbox. And it's 3 simple videos, 15 minutes each, so you can watch them 3 days in a row. And it has templates and worksheets, and it has a whole kit there for you to start understanding where fear seeps into those goals, fear seeps into those dreams, and how you can pull it out, yank it out, and say, no, thank you, fear. I got this. I got this. And so that is my gift to you, fearlessliving.org/risk, because I know there's nothing wrong with you, and I want you to know the same.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Rhonda. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Miss Nicole. I so loved being here. Thank you.